I've worked the night shift at the Starlight Data Center for 3 years. It's a job that's become as routine as my own heartbeat. I know every creak of the metal floor, every flicker of the fluorescent lights, and every hum of the servers. It's a symphony of quiet, a soothing melody that lulls me into a state of numbness. But last Tuesday, the night shift took a turn for the surreal. As I settled into my chair, I checked the security feeds on my screens. There are 64 of them, each one a window into a different part of the data center. Some show rows of humming servers, while others capture the empty corridors. I've grown accustomed to the monotony of watching the same feeds night after night, but last Tuesday, something caught my eye. It was 2:14 a.m. when I saw it on camera 12, the basement records room. A woman in a pale blue dress was standing at the very end of the hall, facing the wall. I rubbed my eyes, thinking it was a screen burn-in, but when I looked back, she had turned around. She wasn't looking at the hallway, she was looking directly into the camera lens. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's just a glitch, or, it's probably a maintenance worker in a blue dress. But here's the thing, we don't have any maintenance workers on duty at night. And I checked the badge logs. No one had entered or exited in 4 hours. I was the only person in the building. The image on the screen was grainy, but there was something unsettling about it. Maybe it was the way the woman's face seemed to be watching me. I tried to look away, but my eyes were locked on the screen. She hadn't moved an inch since I first saw her, but I could feel a growing sense of unease creeping up my spine. I reached for the radio to call my supervisor, but all that came out was a sound like wet gravel being crushed. Crunch. Slither. Crunch. I looked back at the monitor, and she was closer now. She hadn't walked, she had simply glitched 10 feet forward every time I blinked. I tried to look away, but my eyes were glued to the screen. The woman's face was unnaturally long, her eyes replaced by dark, hollow pits. It was as if she was made of shadows, and the more I looked at her, the more she seemed to blend into the darkness. I felt a chill run down my spine as she leaned in closer, her face inches from the camera lens. And then, she whispered. Not through the speakers, but from right behind my chair. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I just looked at the monitor in front of me. On the live feed of the security office, my office, I saw myself sitting there, frozen. And I saw her. She wasn't a ghost. She was a reflection. A reflection from a world that only exists when the sun goes down. I felt a wave of confusion wash over me as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. Was I hallucinating? Was I losing my mind? The woman leaned into my ear and whispered the same thing I'd been saying to myself all night, just 5 more hours until the shift ends. But the problem is, the sun never rose today. And I'm still sitting in this chair. As I sat there, frozen, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was trapped in some kind of never-ending nightmare. The woman's face was still etched into my mind, her dark eyes watching me from the shadows. I knew I had to get out of there, but my chair seemed to be stuck to the floor, and I couldn't move. The hours ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity. I was trapped in a world of darkness, unable to escape the grasp of the woman in the pale blue dress. And as the minutes turned into hours, I realized that I was running out of time. The shift was supposed to end hours ago, but I was still stuck in this chair, unable to move. I'm not sure what happened next. I don't know if I fell asleep or if I was simply trapped in some kind of time loop. But when I woke up, or whenever it was that I woke up, the woman was gone. The screens were dark, and the data center was quiet. I was alone, stuck in a world of silence and darkness. As I sat there, trying to make sense of what had happened, I realized that I had been given a gift. A gift of time. Time to think, time to reflect, and time to wonder. And as I sat there, pondering the mystery of the woman in the pale blue dress, I knew that I would never see the world in the same way again. The night shift had changed me. It had shown me a world that exists beyond the realm of the ordinary, a world where the rules don't apply, and where the darkness is alive. And as I sat there, frozen in time, I knew that I would never be the same again. The anomaly. I've been staring at the security feed for what feels like an eternity, trying to make sense of what I just saw. A woman in a pale blue dress, standing perfectly still at the end of a dark corridor. It's as if she materialized out of thin air, or maybe I just caught a glimpse of something that's been there all along. I've been working at the Starlight Data Center for years, and I know every inch of this place. But this is something different. The cameras are set to record any movement, no matter how slight. And yet, this woman seems to have appeared out of nowhere. I've checked the badge logs, the access records, everything. No one has entered or exited the basement records room in the past 4 hours. It's as if she's a ghost, a phantasm that only exists in the shadows. But that's not the weirdest part. When I looked back at the monitor, she had turned around. She wasn't looking at the hallway, she was looking directly into the camera lens. It's a strange feeling, knowing that someone is staring straight at you, even if it's just a screen. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I gazed back at her. She didn't blink, didn't move. She just kept staring, her eyes locked onto mine. I tried to look away, but my eyes seemed to be glued to the screen. I felt like I was trapped in some kind of twisted game, where I couldn't escape. And then, just as I was starting to feel like I was losing my mind, the screen started to distort. The static was like a living thing, writhing and twisting like a snake. The woman's face was stretched out, her eyes replaced by dark, hollow pits. It was like looking into the abyss. I tried to reach for the radio to call my supervisor, but all that came out was a sound like wet gravel being crushed. Crunch. Slither. Crunch. It was like the speakers were trying to tell me something, but I couldn't quite make out what. I looked back at the monitor, and she was closer now. She hadn't walked, she had simply glitched 10 feet forward every time I blinked. It was like she was toying with me, playing some kind of twisted game. I felt a presence behind me, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I just looked at the monitor in front of me. On the live feed of the security office, my office, I saw myself sitting there, frozen. And I saw her. She was standing right behind me, her pale blue dress blending seamlessly into the shadows. She leaned into my ear and whispered the same thing I'd been saying to myself all night, just 5 more hours until the shift ends. But the problem is, the sun never rose today. And I'm still sitting in this chair. I've been staring at the screen for what feels like an eternity, trying to make sense of what just happened. But the more I think about it, the more it makes no sense. A woman in a pale blue dress, appearing out of nowhere, staring straight into my eyes. It's like something out of a horror movie. But this is real. This is happening right now. I've been working at the Starlight Data Center for years, and I've never seen anything like this. It's like she's a part of the system, a glitch in the matrix. But what if she's not? What if she's something more? Something that exists outside the boundaries of this world. I don't know what's going on, but I know one thing: I need to get to the bottom of this. I need to understand what's happening, and why. And I need to get out of this chair before it's too late. But as I look around the security office, I realize that I'm not alone. There's something standing right behind me, watching me, waiting for me to make my next move. And I know that I'm in grave danger. The question is, what's going to happen next? As I sit here, frozen in fear, I realize that I'm trapped in a world that's not my own. A world where the rules are different, where the laws of physics don't apply. A world where the impossible becomes possible, and the unthinkable becomes real. And I'm not sure if I'll ever be able to escape. The glitch. As I stared at the monitor, the woman's image began to distort, like heat haze on a summer road. Her face stretched and melted, her eyes boiling down to dark, hollow pits. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that whatever she wasn't quite human. The static on the screen grew louder, like a bad connection on a phone call. I strained to hear what she was saying, but all I could make out was a faint whisper, like a breath on the back of my neck. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the static stopped. The woman's face snapped back into focus, and she was closer now, her eyes fixed on the camera lens like a predator zeroing in on its prey. I tried to look away, but I was transfixed by the screen. She hadn't moved, but somehow, she was closer. Closer than I was comfortable with. And then, I heard it. The crunch of gravel underfoot, like someone was walking right behind me. I spun around in my chair, but there was no one there. Just the cold, dark silence of the security office. I turned back to the monitor, but she was gone. The screen was dark, except for the faint glow of the camera's LED. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. It was just a glitch. Just a malfunction. But as I looked back at the screen, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The camera feed was showing a different room now. A room that I'd never seen before. A room that didn't exist in the Starlight data center. I felt a hand on my shoulder. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I knew exactly who it was. The woman in the pale blue dress. She was standing right behind me, her hand resting on my shoulder like a cold, dead weight. "You're not alone," she whispered. Her voice was like a breeze on a summer's day, but it sent shivers down my spine. I tried to shake her off, but she didn't budge. She just leaned in closer, her voice a gentle whisper in my ear. "You're not alone," she said again. "And you never will be." I felt a presence behind me, like someone was watching us. I turned to look, but there was no one there. Just the dark, empty space of the security office. But I knew I wasn't alone. I knew that she was still there, watching me, waiting for me. And as the sun began to rise outside, casting a pale, golden light over the office, I realized that I was trapped in a world that existed only in the shadows. A world where the sun never rose, and the darkness was always watching. I stared at the monitor, trying to make sense of what I just saw. The woman's image was still there, her pale blue dress a stark contrast to the drab, gray background of the corridor. I replayed the events in my head, trying to pinpoint what exactly had happened. The distortion, the glitch, the whisper in my ear. It all felt like a dream, a surreal nightmare that I was still trapped in. But then I saw her again. This time, I wasn't looking at the monitor. I was looking at myself. Sitting in my chair, frozen in time. And behind me, her hand was resting on my shoulder. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that she wasn't just a reflection. She was a presence. A presence that only existed when the sun was down. I thought back to the night shift, the quiet hours ticking by like grains of sand in an hourglass. I'd worked this job for 3 years, and in all that time, I'd never noticed anything like this. The woman in the pale blue dress, the glitching image, the whisper in my ear. It was as if I'd been living in a bubble, oblivious to a world that existed just beyond the edge of my reality. And now, I was starting to realize the truth. The woman wasn't a ghost. She was a reflection of me. A reflection from a world that only exists when the sun goes down. I thought about all the nights I'd worked, the long hours staring at monitors, the endless cups of coffee. And I wondered, had I been seeing glimpses of this world all along? Had I been living in a parallel reality, unaware of the presence that lurked just beyond the edge of my perception? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. I looked around the room, feeling a sense of disorientation. The fluorescent lights above me seemed to hum louder, the shadows on the walls twisting and writhing like living things. I knew I had to get out of there, to escape the world that was closing in on me. But as I turned to leave, I realized that I was stuck. The sun never rose today. And I'm still sitting in this chair. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I was trapped. I was living in a world that only existed when the sun went down. And I had no idea how to escape. The woman in the pale blue dress leaned into my ear again, her whisper echoing in my mind. "Just 5 more hours until the shift ends." I knew that I had to wait it out, to see if I could find a way to escape this world. But as the hours ticked by, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was running out of time. As I stared at the monitor, the woman's image began to distort, like heat haze on a summer road. Her face stretched and melted, her eyes boiling down to dark, hollow pits. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that whatever she wasn't just a glitch. She was a reflection of something more, something that existed beyond the confines of this dingy office and its flickering fluorescent lights. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease, telling myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But as I looked back at the monitor, I saw her standing in the same spot, her pale blue dress a stark contrast to the drab, gray background of the corridor. This time, she wasn't just a static image, she was moving, her body twitching and jerking like a puppet on a string. I felt a sense of horror creeping up my spine as I realized that I wasn't alone in this office. There was something else with me, something that was watching me, waiting for me to make a move. And then, I saw it. A figure standing just behind me, its presence reflected in the glass of the monitor. My heart was racing as I spun around in my chair, but there was no one there. The office was empty, the only sound the hum of the servers and the creaking of the old building. But as I looked back at the monitor, I saw that she was closer now, her face distorted and twisted, her eyes burning with an otherworldly intensity. I tried to speak, to call out for help, but my voice was frozen in my throat. I was trapped, unable to move or speak, as the woman's image began to distort and melt once more. This time, however, it wasn't just her face that was changing. The entire room was shifting and warping, like a funhouse mirror reflecting my deepest fears. And then, everything went black. When I came to, I was still sitting in my chair, the monitor still flickering with an image that wasn't quite clear. But as I looked closer, I saw that it was no longer the woman's face that was reflected in the glass. It was my own, distorted and twisted, like a reflection in a broken mirror. I knew then that I had to get out of there, to escape from this place and its sinister forces. But as I turned to leave, I saw that the door was locked, the keys gone. I was trapped, alone and frightened, with no way out. The monitor flickered again, and I saw that the woman was back, her face twisted and distorted. But this time, she wasn't alone. There was someone else with her, someone who was watching me, waiting for me to make my move. And then, everything went black once more. When I came to, I was no longer in the office. I was somewhere.